Hi guys, tonight, we travel back into the world's most forgotten history. Close your eyes, relax, and drift into history. Welcome to another quiet journey through the past. Tonight's story begins in a distant forgotten age. Settle in, and let history slowly fade you into sleep. This is boring history for sleep. Relax, and step gently into the ancient world. Tonight, history becomes calm, quiet, and sleepy. Let the past carry you softly into sleep. In tonight's slow and peaceful history story, we find ourselves beside a river that seemed to move almost as slowly as time itself. The night air is warm. A gentle breeze drifts across the water. The Nile River glides through the darkness, reflecting a few scattered stars above. The surface of the water barely ripples. Somewhere in the distance, a small wooden boat rests against a muddy bank. The sounds are soft. Water touches reeds growing near the shore. An insect hums in the darkness. Far away, a dog barks once and then becomes silent again. The world feels still. It is easy to imagine that this same quiet night could belong to almost any century in ancient Egypt. That was one of the unusual things about this civilization. For very long periods of time, life changed slowly. Years passed. Generations passed. Kings came and went. Children grew old. Yet many ordinary people woke each morning to routines that felt familiar to their grandparents and great-grandparents. The river rose. The river fell. Seeds were planted. Grain was harvested. Bread was baked. Boats traveled north and south. The rhythm continued. As we settle into the ancient landscape, it helps to leave behind the idea that history always moves quickly. For many people in ancient Egypt, change often arrived so gradually that it was almost invisible. A farmer working in a field might have lived much like his father. His father may have lived much like his grandfather. The houses looked similar. The tools felt familiar. The roads followed old paths. The river continued flowing exactly where it always had. Night after night, oil lamps glowed inside mud-brick homes. Morning after morning, workers stepped outside into the growing heat. The great monuments that survive today can sometimes make ancient Egypt seem dramatic and grand. Yet most people spent their lives far from palaces. Most people lived ordinary days. Their concerns were simple. Would there be enough grain? Would the river rise properly? Would the family remain healthy? Would the roof survive another season? These questions changed very little. And because daily life changed so slowly, ancient Egypt developed a feeling of stability that lasted for centuries. Imagine standing beside a village before sunrise. The sky is dark blue. The stars slowly fade. A rooster calls somewhere beyond the houses. The air is cool for a brief moment before the heat arrives. One by one, small fires begin to glow. Women prepare grain. Children stir awake. Someone sweeps dust from a doorway. Someone else carries water from a nearby source. Sandals scrape softly against packed earth. The village begins another day. Not a new kind of day. Simply another day. Very much like yesterday. Very much like last year. Very much like many years before that. This rhythm shaped the way Egyptians thought about the world. Predictability brought comfort. The annual flooding of the Nile was one of the most important events in their lives. Every year, water spread across the land. Every year, rich dark soil remained behind. Every year, new crops could grow. The flood was not merely a natural event. It was part of the order of existence itself. The river created a dependable pattern. and dependable patterns encourage stable societies. When people know what tomorrow may bring, they often build their lives around those expectations. In Egypt, entire communities moved according to seasonal routines. Farmers understood when fields would need attention. Boatmen understood river travel. Scribes understood tax records. Builders understood labor schedules. Everyone fit into a larger cycle. The cycle continued year after year. As dawn arrives over the Nile, the first sunlight touches the tops of distant palm trees. Birds move through the reeds. The sky brightens slowly. Workers begin their journeys. Some head toward fields. Some walk toward workshops. Some travel toward docks where boats wait along the water. The roads are dusty. Feet leave temporary marks that disappear beneath the movements of countless others. The smell of baking bread drifts through the village. Fresh loaves emerge from clay ovens. The scent mixes with smoke from cooking fires. For many families, bread forms the center of daily meals. Making it requires work. Grain must be grown, harvested, stored, ground into flour, mixed, baked. Every stage depends upon routines developed over generations. Nothing needs to be reinvented. The methods already exist. The methods are trusted. And trust in old ways becomes another reason why change arrives slowly. People often continue doing things that work. Ancient Egyptians were no different. A farmer using a familiar tool may have seen little reason to replace it. A builder following proven techniques may have preferred tradition over experimentation. A village elder might pass knowledge directly to younger generations. Experience carried great value. The old methods had survived because they succeeded. As the morning grows warmer, activity spreads across the countryside. Fields fill with workers. Oxen move steadily through cultivated land. Voices carry across open spaces. Tools strike soil. Birds circle overhead. The work is not easy. It rarely was. Ancient Egypt depended upon labor. Long hours beneath the sun shaped daily existence. The heat became a constant companion. Sweat darkened clothing. Dust settled onto skin. Muscles grew tired. Yet people continued because life required it. In many ways, ordinary labor connected the centuries together. A farmer working a field in one generation performed tasks recognizable to farmers living hundreds of years later. The landscape itself encouraged continuity. The Nile Valley was narrow. Desert stretched beyond fertile land. Most people lived close to the river. Communities remained connected to the same agricultural system. The same source of life. The same dependable water. The same yearly flood. Geography quietly encouraged stability. The river became a thread running through every generation. By late morning, the heat grows heavier. The sunlight brightens the pale walls of homes. Inside workshops, craftsmen continue their work. Woodworkers shape furniture. Potters form clay vessels. Weavers create cloth. Scribes sit with writing materials nearby. Each occupation depends upon learned skills. Each skill is passed from one person to another. Knowledge travels through families, apprenticeships, and tradition. This is another reason change often moved slowly. Information spread slowly too. There were no quick messages crossing vast distances. Most knowledge traveled through direct human contact. A master taught a student. A parent taught a child. A worker taught an apprentice. Lessons moved at the speed of conversation. And conversations take time. As the sun climbs higher, some workers pause briefly in shaded areas. The relief is welcome. The desert climate can be unforgiving. Even simple tasks require effort. A laborer may sit against a wall and drink water. Nearby, others rest quietly. No one hurries. The heat itself discourages rushing. The pace of life often follows the pace of the environment. The environment of Egypt favored patience. It favored routine. It favored persistence. Through long centuries, these qualities became deeply woven into society. And so, while other regions sometimes experience sudden movement, migration, or instability, Egypt often continued along familiar paths. Not always. Not perfectly. But often enough that continuity became one of its defining features. The afternoon settles heavily across the land. The river shines beneath the sun. Boats drift steadily along ancient routes. Merchants carry goods. Officials travel between settlements. Fishermen check nets. Life continues. Always moving. Yet somehow also remaining the same. And as the day slowly begins its journey toward evening, we can start to understand why ancient Egypt changed so gradually. The answer was not a single king. Not a single law. Not a single event. The answer lived inside countless ordinary routines. Inside fields. Inside workshops. Inside kitchens. Inside boats. Inside family traditions. Inside the dependable flow of the Nile itself. Day after day. Year after year. Century after century. The river continued moving quietly through the heart of Egypt, carrying not only water, but also a powerful sense of continuity. And as shadows begin to lengthen across the fields, workers slowly prepare for the evening ahead. The heat softens. The air becomes gentler. The long day approaches its end. Yet tomorrow will look very familiar. And that simple expectation may have been one of the strongest forces shaping ancient Egypt for thousands of years. The slow rhythm continues. As the afternoon light begins to soften, the fields beside the Nile take on a different appearance. The bright glare of midday slowly fades. Long shadows stretch across the earth. The heat remains, but it is no longer as sharp as it was only a few hours before. Workers continue their tasks. Some bend over rows of growing plants. Some carry tools across dusty ground. Others guide animals toward water. The sounds of labor drift gently through the warm air. Voices rise and fall. Wood creaks. Footsteps crunch over dry soil. The world feels busy, yet unhurried. No one seems surprised by the day. No one seems uncertain about what comes next. That certainty was one of the quiet foundations of Egyptian life. Many people knew exactly what tomorrow would require. They knew where they would walk. They knew what tools they would carry. They knew which fields needed attention. They knew which duties waited for them. This predictability did not make life easy. Life could still be difficult. People became sick. Floods sometimes failed. Food shortages occurred. Families experienced loss. Yet even during difficult times, the framework of daily life often remained recognizable. The routines survived. And those routines helped shape a society that often preferred continuity over sudden change. As evening approaches, a farmer slowly leaves the field. His shoulders ache. Dust clings to his legs. His hands are rough from work. The path home is familiar. He has walked it hundreds of times before. Perhaps thousands. The road curves beside irrigation channels. Small birds move among the reeds. The smell of damp earth rises from the riverbank. Ahead, the village waits beneath the fading light. Mud-brick homes stand close together. Their walls glow softly in the evening sun. Children run through narrow spaces between buildings. Dogs wander quietly. Cooking fires begin to appear. Thin streams of smoke rise toward the darkening sky. Inside one home, grain is being ground. The steady sound of stone against stone fills the room. A woman kneels beside a grinding stone, performing a task that countless women performed before her. The movement is familiar. The rhythm is familiar. The result is familiar. Tomorrow the same work will likely continue. The next day as well. And perhaps many years later, another member of the family will perform exactly the same task. These small repetitions mattered. They created stability inside ordinary life. The great monuments of Egypt often receive attention because they survive. But ordinary routines survive too. Not in stone. Not in towering structures. But in habits. In customs. In expectations. In the simple knowledge passed from one generation to another. As darkness slowly arrives, families gather for the evening meal. The food is plain. Bread sits at the center of the meal. There may be vegetables. Perhaps fish from the river. Sometimes fruit. Sometimes beer made from grain. The meal is not extravagant. For most people, it never was. But it provides comfort after a long day. The room is lit by small lamps. The light flickers gently against the walls. Shadows move softly across the floor. Outside, the sounds of the village gradually become quieter. People settle into the slower pace of evening. The coolness of night is welcomed. Throughout much of the year, the heat dominates the daytime hours. Night offers relief. Families rest. Workers stretch tired muscles. Children become sleepy. The village grows calmer. Across Egypt, scenes like this repeated endlessly. Village after village. Year after year. The same evening meals. The same conversations. The same concerns. The same hopes. This repetition helped create a powerful sense of order. People understood their place within society. Not because everything was perfect, but because the structure around them remained remarkably consistent. A farmer expected to farm. A fisherman expected to fish. A builder expected to build. A scribe expected to write. Each role fit into a larger pattern. And patterns are easier to preserve than constant change. The stars appear above the Nile. The river reflects faint points of light. Boats rest quietly along the shore. The water continues moving through the darkness. It never truly stops. Yet it moves without hurry. Its pace feels eternal. Many Egyptians likely saw the river as something dependable in an uncertain world. The Nile did not ask people to invent a new way of life every generation. Instead, it rewarded continuity. It rewarded patience. It rewarded careful observation of natural cycles. A family that understood the river's behavior could plan for the future. A community that respected the seasonal patterns could survive. Over time, these lessons became deeply rooted. People learned not only how to work the land. They learned how to trust familiar systems. That trust became part of Egyptian culture. And culture can sometimes be one of the strongest forces resisting rapid change. As the night deepens, a scribe sits beneath the glow of a lamp. His work differs from that of the farmer. His hands are cleaner. His duties are different. Yet he too operates within established traditions. The writing system has rules. Records follow accepted formats. Official documents rely upon familiar methods. The education of a scribe often involves copying texts repeatedly. Learning comes through repetition. Mastery comes through repetition. Knowledge itself is preserved through repetition. In many ways, the scribes helped carry continuity across generations. A document written decades earlier could still guide decisions. Ancient records remained valuable. Old knowledge remained useful. Tradition remained respected. This respect for the past influenced many areas of life. Buildings followed established designs. Religious practices followed established customs. Ceremonies followed established patterns. The old ways carried authority. The longer a tradition survived, the more trustworthy it often appeared. For many people, there was comfort in that. The world already felt large and unpredictable enough. The desert stretched beyond the fertile land. Storms could arrive. Disease could spread. Accidents could happen. The familiar routines of society offered a sense of security. People knew what was expected. They knew how life was supposed to function. And because those expectations remained stable, dramatic change often felt unnecessary. The hours pass quietly. The village sleeps. Somewhere nearby, water laps gently against a riverbank. A breeze stirs through palm leaves. The smell of earth and water drifts through the darkness. Inside simple homes, workers rest on woven mats. Tomorrow will bring another day of labor. The fields will still need attention. The boats will still travel. The ovens will still bake bread. The workshops will still open. Life will continue. As it usually did. As it usually had. As many expected it always would. Far away, larger towns and cities rest beneath the same night sky. Even there, continuity remains important. Markets operate according to familiar rhythms. Officials maintain records. Merchants follow established trade routes. Temples conduct rituals that have been practiced for generations. The larger the institution, the more it often depends upon stability. Sudden change can create uncertainty. Gradual change allows systems to adapt. Egypt frequently favored the gradual path. Not because its people lacked creativity. Not because they lacked intelligence. But because many parts of their world already worked well enough to support daily life. When systems provide food, water, transportation, and social order, people often preserve them. That preservation can last a very long time. And in Egypt, it often did. The moon rises higher. Silver light touches the river. The landscape appears softer now. The sharp edges of day disappear. Everything feels quieter. Gentler. Almost timeless. Standing here beside the Nile, it becomes easier to understand how generations could feel connected to one another. A child growing up in one century might recognize many features of life that existed centuries before. The same river. The same fields. The same crops. The same homes. The same seasonal rhythms. Not identical in every detail, but familiar enough to create a strong sense of continuity. And continuity has a remarkable power. It shapes expectations. It shapes behavior. It shapes entire civilizations. The ancient Egyptians lived within one of history's most enduring patterns. That pattern flowed through daily life like the river itself. Slow. Steady. Dependable. Beneath the stars, while families sleep and boats rest along the dark shoreline, Egypt continues following its ancient rhythm. The water moves quietly through the night. The reeds sway gently. The desert waits beyond the fertile valley. And somewhere in the darkness, another generation is already growing up inside the same enduring world, learning the same routines that countless others learned before them. And somewhere in the darkness, another generation is already growing up inside the same enduring world, learning the same routines that countless others learned before them. The night passes slowly. A few lamps continue to glow inside homes where someone remains awake a little longer. A mother comforts a restless child. An elderly man shifts on a woven mat. Somewhere near the riverbank, a fisherman checks a rope securing his boat before returning to sleep. Most of the village rests. The silence feels deep but not empty. There is always a faint sound somewhere. A distant animal. The whisper of moving water. The gentle stirring of wind through reeds. The Nile never truly becomes silent. Its presence fills the darkness. It moves steadily northward beneath the stars, just as it did yesterday and just as it will tomorrow. Hours pass. The eastern horizon slowly begins to lighten. The darkness softens. The stars fade one by one. A pale glow appears above the distant landscape. Another day is approaching. The cycle begins again. Long before the sun rises fully, some workers are already awake. The coolest hours of the day are valuable. A woman steps outside carrying a clay jar. The air feels pleasant against her skin. Nearby, another family is already preparing a small morning meal. The smell of smoke rises into the quiet dawn. A donkey shifts its weight and waits patiently. Across the village, doors open. People emerge into the early light. There is no announcement that a new day has begun. No signal that history is moving forward. Life simply continues. And for many centuries in ancient Egypt, this continuation was more important than change itself. A child born into the village quickly learns the rhythms of daily life. The lessons begin early. Watch the adults. Observe the fields. Learn where food comes from. Learn when to plant. Learn when to harvest. Learn how to care for tools. Learn how to respect the river. Most knowledge comes through observation. Children see the same actions repeated again and again. Over time those actions become normal. What is normal often becomes tradition. And tradition can become surprisingly strong. Imagine a young boy walking beside his father toward the fields. The morning sun is still low. Long shadows stretch across the ground. Dust rises softly beneath their sandals. The father speaks little. He does not need lengthy explanations. The landscape itself teaches many lessons. The child sees where the irrigation channels run. He sees how water reaches the crops. He sees which plants need attention. Year after year, these observations build understanding. One day he may guide his own children along the same paths. The knowledge passes forward. Not quickly. Not dramatically. But steadily. Like the river. The Nile shaped far more than agriculture. It shaped expectations. Its annual flooding followed a pattern that people could observe across generations. Of course, the flood was never exactly the same every year. Some years were stronger. Some years were weaker. Yet the general rhythm remained dependable. That dependability encouraged long-term thinking. People could prepare. Communities could organize. Officials could plan. When nature follows recognizable cycles, societies often do the same. Morning gradually spreads across the countryside. Golden light touches fields and villages. Birds move through the reeds. Boats begin leaving the shore. The river becomes active once more. Some vessels carry grain. Some carry stone. Some carry passengers traveling between settlements. The boatmen know these routes well. Many waterways have been used for generations. The same destinations. The same currents. The same stretches of river. The journey itself becomes part of a routine repeated countless times. As the sun climbs higher, activity increases. Workshops open. Craftsmen begin their daily tasks. The smell of wood shavings fills one workshop. In another, clay waits beside a potter's wheel. Nearby, a weaver settles into a familiar position. Hands begin moving almost automatically. Years of practice have made the motions effortless. Thread passes through fingers. Patterns emerge slowly. Every skilled worker carries knowledge developed through repetition. The craft improves not through sudden inspiration but through patient practice. This patience appears again and again throughout Egyptian life. Builders learn slowly. Farmers learn slowly. Scribes learn slowly. Children grow slowly. Fields mature slowly. The civilization itself often moved at a similar pace. Many people today imagine history as a sequence of dramatic events. But for ordinary Egyptians, most years probably felt remarkably similar. A major event occurring far away might never directly affect a small farming village. The harvest still needed attention. The animals still required care. The bread still needed baking. The river still flowed. The practical needs of daily life remained. Because daily life demanded so much effort, there was often little reason to seek constant change. Imagine the amount of work required simply to maintain a household. Water must be collected. Food must be prepared. Clothing must be repaired. Children must be cared for. Animals must be managed. Storage containers must be maintained. Tools must be repaired. Every task consumes time and energy. The modern idea of constantly transforming society would have felt distant from these immediate concerns. Most people focused on what needed to be done today. Then tomorrow. Then the day after that. The result was a civilization built upon countless small acts of maintenance. Maintenance of homes. Maintenance of fields. Maintenance of traditions. Maintenance of social order. Maintenance of memory. By midday, the heat becomes intense once again. The air shimmers above the ground. Workers wipe sweat from their faces. Shade becomes precious. Some laborers pause beneath simple shelters. Others rest beside walls. The sunlight brightens every surface. Mud brick buildings absorb warmth. The smell of hot earth fills the air. Life continues despite the heat. It always has. The climate itself encourages certain habits. Work begins early. Rest becomes important. People learn how to move through the seasons. Over generations these habits become deeply familiar. Even the architecture reflects this gradual adaptation. Homes are designed to provide relief from the sun. Narrow openings help manage heat. Thick walls offer protection. The buildings are not random creations. They represent generations of accumulated experience. Someone learned what worked. Others copied it. The design spread. The knowledge survived. This process appears throughout Egyptian society. Useful ideas remain. Successful methods endure. Gradual improvements occur, but often within an existing framework. The framework itself remains remarkably stable. As afternoon approaches, the marketplace grows busy. Merchants arrange goods carefully. Customers move between stalls. Voices blend into a gentle background hum. Baskets filled with produce sit beside jars and woven goods. The smell of food drifts through the air. Trade has existed here for many years. The marketplace is familiar territory. People know where to go. They know who sells certain items. They know the customs that guide exchanges. Even commerce follows established patterns. The predictability of these interactions helps communities function smoothly. Trust develops slowly. Reputation develops slowly. Relationships develop slowly. And once established, they can endure for generations. Near the edge of the marketplace, a scribe records information. His reed brush moves carefully. Each mark matters. Records help maintain order. Taxes, deliveries, inventories, agreements. The details are preserved. Writing allows continuity to extend beyond memory alone. A farmer may remember his father's advice. A scribe can preserve instructions long after the original writer is gone. This ability strengthens stability. Knowledge no longer depends entirely on spoken words. Documents help connect generations. The sun begins its slow descent. The harshest heat gradually weakens. Long shadows return. Workers feel the first signs of relief. The afternoon light becomes softer. The countryside appears calmer. A fisherman pulls in a net near the riverbank. The movement is practiced and familiar. His father likely performed similar actions. His grandfather may have done the same. The tools might differ slightly. The people change. Yet the routine remains recognizable. This is one of the quiet secrets behind Egypt's long stability. Many aspects of life were anchored to recurring activities. When daily experiences remain consistent, change often arrives gently rather than suddenly. Even religious life reflected this preference for continuity. Ceremonies followed established patterns. Sacred traditions linked present generations to earlier ones. People often felt connected not only to their families but also to ancestors who had lived long before them. The past remained close. Not forgotten. Not distant. Present in stories. Present in customs. Present in rituals. Respect for ancestors naturally encourages respect for tradition. And respect for tradition often slows rapid transformation. As evening settles across the Nile Valley once more, workers begin their journeys home. Dusty roads fill with familiar faces. The day's labor is ending. The village awaits. Cooking fires appear again. Smoke rises into the cooling air. Children laugh nearby. Animals settle for the night. The smell of baking bread drifts through the streets. Another ordinary day is drawing to a close. Nothing dramatic has happened. No great battle has interrupted the routine. No sudden revolution has changed the village. Instead, life has followed its usual course. And that ordinary pattern, repeated across centuries, may explain more about ancient Egypt than any single king or monument ever could. The evening sky slowly deepens into shades of purple and blue. The first stars appear. Families gather. Meals are shared. Stories are told. Tired workers rest aching muscles. The air feels cooler now. Gentler. The river reflects the growing darkness. Its surface glimmers beneath moonlight. And once again, Egypt settles into another peaceful night, carrying forward the same quiet rhythm that has guided generations through the endless flow of time. And once again, Egypt settles into another peaceful night, carrying forward the same quiet rhythm that has guided generations through the endless flow of time. The moon hangs above the Nile. Its pale light spreads across the water like a thin silver path. The river moves quietly through the darkness. Along the banks, reeds sway gently whenever the breeze passes through. Most homes have become silent now. The day's work has ended. Families sleep beneath simple roofs of mud brick and timber. The heat stored in the walls slowly escapes into the cooler night air. A few embers still glow inside cooking fires. Their faint orange light flickers softly before fading away. The village rests. Tomorrow will arrive soon enough. In many parts of ancient Egypt, the difference between one day and the next could seem very small. The same paths would be walked. The same tools would be carried. The same ovens would be heated. The same fields would require attention. This repetition was not accidental. It grew from the way the entire civilization functioned. Egypt was a land built around cycles. The river followed cycles. Agriculture followed cycles. Religious festivals followed cycles. Even the stars above appeared to move in dependable patterns. Everywhere people looked, they found evidence that the world possessed an order. That order brought comfort. It suggested that tomorrow would arrive much like today. And for people who depended on farming, that expectation was valuable. A farmer could not control the weather. He could not command the river. He could not prevent illness. But he could follow routines that generations before him had trusted. Those routines offered a sense of stability in a world that still contained uncertainty. Hours pass. The eastern horizon begins to brighten once more. Another dawn approaches. Birds awaken among the reeds. Their calls drift across the water. The sky changes slowly from black to deep blue. Then to pale gold. The village stirs. Doors open. Sandals touch packed earth. The familiar rhythm begins again. A woman carries water jars balanced carefully. A young boy follows behind her. An older man feeds animals waiting near a small enclosure. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Bread dough is prepared. Grain is ground. The sounds are quiet and ordinary. Yet they are the sounds of a civilization continuing itself. One generation teaching the next. One day resembling the day before. As sunlight spreads across the landscape, workers move toward the fields. The Nile Valley appears green against the surrounding desert. This contrast is striking. Beyond the fertile land, vast stretches of dry earth extend toward the horizon. The desert rarely changes. Its hills remain where they have always been. Its sands shift slowly with the wind. For many Egyptians, the desert formed the boundary of daily life. Beyond it lay distance and uncertainty. Within the valley lay familiarity. The river connected communities. The desert separated them from much of the outside world. This geography helped protect Egypt. For long periods, outside influences arrived gradually. Ideas traveled. People traveled. Goods traveled. But the natural barriers surrounding the Nile Valley often slowed these movements. And when outside influences arrive slowly, societies tend to change slowly as well. The morning grows brighter. Workers spread across the countryside. Some carry baskets. Some guide animals. Others shoulder tools worn smooth from years of use. A wooden handle darkened by countless hands. A basket repaired many times. A fishing net carefully maintained. Objects remain useful because replacing them requires effort. People repair. They preserve. They maintain. This habit of maintenance reaches far beyond simple tools. It becomes a way of thinking. If something works, keep it. If a method succeeds, continue using it. If a tradition provides stability, preserve it. Such attitudes can endure for centuries. Near a canal, a group of farmers works together. Water moves through carefully managed channels. The system is not new. Many generations have contributed to its maintenance. Canals must be cleared. Banks must be repaired. Water flow must be monitored. This requires cooperation. And cooperation encourages continuity. When communities depend upon shared systems, sudden change becomes difficult. Everyone relies upon everyone else. The canal that waters one field may also support another. The labor of one family may benefit many families. Over time, these connections strengthen. The community becomes tied together through practical necessity. The sun climbs higher. The warmth increases. Yet work continues steadily. No one appears rushed. Ancient labor often required endurance more than speed. Tasks were completed through patience, through repetition, through persistence. A worker shaping stone may spend hours making gradual progress. A potter carefully forms clay vessel after clay vessel. A scribe copies line after line of text. The pace is slow, but the results accumulate. Days become months. Months become years. Years become generations. And through those generations, Egypt remains recognizable. One reason for this continuity was the respect given to established knowledge. Experience mattered. Older people carried valuable information. An elder farmer understood seasonal patterns. An experienced boatman knew the river's moods. A skilled builder knew which methods produced strong walls. Their knowledge had been tested by time. People listened because the lessons worked. This respect for experience created a natural connection between past and present. The past was not something distant. It remained useful, practical, alive within everyday decisions. As midday approaches, the sunlight becomes bright and intense. The air shimmers above the fields. Workers seek moments of shade whenever possible. A laborer rests beneath a palm tree. Nearby, another drinks water from a clay vessel. Conversations are quiet. Energy is conserved. The heat encourages calm movements. Even nature seems slower beneath the heavy sun. Birds settle into sheltered places. Animals rest. The entire landscape feels suspended in warmth. Then, gradually, work resumes. The day continues. It always does. This steady continuation shaped Egyptian attitudes toward time itself. Modern people often imagine history moving quickly. But many ancient Egyptians likely experienced time differently. For them, years may have seemed less important than seasons. The flood mattered. The harvest mattered. The planting season mattered. These recurring events structured life. A good flood was remembered. A poor harvest was remembered. The cycle itself remained more important than individual dates. Life followed nature's calendar. Nature rarely rushed. Farther along the river, fishermen prepare their nets. Their boats drift gently beside the bank. The smell of water mixes with damp reeds. The river provides food just as it has for countless generations. Fishing techniques improve slowly. Knowledge accumulates slowly. A father teaches a son where fish gather. A grandfather explains how currents behave. The lessons travel forward through conversation. No written record is required. Memory carries the knowledge. And memory becomes another thread connecting generations. As afternoon arrives, a merchant guides a donkey along a dusty road. The animal carries goods intended for another settlement. The journey is familiar. Many merchants follow established routes. The same villages appear. The same resting places. The same river crossings. Trade expands connections between communities, but even trade often follows traditions built over long periods. People trust known routes. They trust familiar partners. They trust methods proven by experience. Stability grows from these repeated interactions. The afternoon light begins to soften. Shadows stretch across the earth once again. Workers feel the day's fatigue settling into their muscles. Hands ache. Feet ache. Shoulders ache. Ancient life required enormous physical effort. Many people spent their days performing demanding labor. Yet even exhaustion became part of the rhythm. Work. Rest. Sleep. Work again. The cycle repeated. A tired farmer returning home today would understand the fatigue felt by farmers many generations earlier. The experience was shared across centuries. As evening approaches, activity gradually shifts back toward the village. Children return from errands. Animals are guided into secure spaces. Cooking begins. The smell of bread rises once more. Smoke drifts upward into the fading light. The village becomes lively in a different way. The labor of the fields gives way to the quieter activities of home. Families gather. Voices mingle. Simple meals are prepared. Stories are exchanged. Perhaps an older relative remembers events from many years ago. Perhaps a child listens carefully. The past continues flowing into the future. Not through grand announcements. Not through dramatic change. But through ordinary conversations beneath a fading sky. Darkness slowly returns. The stars appear one by one. The Nile reflects their light. The desert beyond the fertile valley becomes a vast shadow. The air cools. Relief spreads across the land. Workers stretch tired limbs before settling down to rest. The day's effort is finished. Tomorrow's effort will come soon enough. And so another evening settles over ancient Egypt. The river continues its quiet journey through the night. The villages remain close to its banks. The fields wait patiently for the next sunrise. And throughout the valley, countless ordinary people drift into sleep, carrying forward the same enduring patterns that have shaped their world for generations beyond memory. And throughout the valley, countless ordinary people drift into sleep, carrying forward the same enduring patterns that have shaped their world for generations beyond memory. The night deepens. A gentle breeze moves across the Nile. Palm leaves rustle softly in the darkness. The river reflects the stars above, turning the water into a long ribbon of faint silver light stretching through the valley. Most homes are quiet now. Inside mud-brick walls, families sleep close together. The floors beneath them are hard. Simple woven mats provide comfort where they can. Some people rest lightly after a long day of labor. Others fall quickly into deep sleep, their bodies exhausted from hours beneath the sun. Outside, the village seems almost frozen in time. The narrow pathways between homes lie empty. The ovens have cooled. The workshops stand silent. Even the animals seem calmer. Only the river continues its endless movement. If someone could somehow stand beside the Nile and watch many centuries pass in a single night, they might notice something remarkable. The river would remain. The fields would remain. The villages would remain. The faces would change. The names would change. The generations would come and go. Yet much of daily life would appear surprisingly familiar. This was one of the quiet strengths of ancient Egypt. Its foundations were deeply rooted. Not rooted in a single ruler. Not rooted in a single city, but rooted in the ordinary routines of millions of people. The routine of waking before sunrise. The routine of preparing food. The routine of tending fields. The routine of repairing tools. The routine of caring for children. These repeated actions connected one generation to the next. Long before the first light appears, a baker is already awake. His work begins early. The coolest hours are precious. Inside a simple workspace, grain waits to be transformed into flour. The smell of dust and grain fills the air. Hands move through familiar motions. Nothing feels new. Nothing feels uncertain. The process has been practiced many times before. Outside, darkness slowly begins to fade. The eastern horizon grows lighter. Another day approaches. The baker continues working. Nearby, other villagers begin to wake. A woman gathers water jars. A farmer checks his tools. A fisherman prepares for the morning. The village gradually comes alive. The beginning of each day follows patterns that everyone understands. Nobody needs instructions. Nobody needs reminders. The rhythm lives inside them. Children learn it simply by growing up within it. As the sun rises, golden light spreads across the Nile Valley. The river glows softly. Mist lingers above the water in some places. Birds move across the sky. The air remains pleasant for a short while before the heat arrives. Workers begin walking toward their tasks. Their footsteps create small clouds of dust. The paths are ancient. Many have existed for generations. Countless feet have traveled them. A young girl follows her mother toward a communal grinding area. An older boy carries a basket. An elderly man sits outside his home, watching the morning unfold. Each person has a role. Each role contributes to the larger community. The structure feels natural because it has existed for so long. This stability shaped the way Egyptians understood their world. Many people likely believed that the proper order of life should continue. The river should flood. The crops should grow. Families should work. Children should learn. The seasons should follow one another. When these things happened as expected, life felt balanced. Order was not merely practical. It was comforting. A world that follows familiar patterns feels safer than a world filled with constant surprises. The morning continues. In the fields, labor begins once again. Farmers inspect crops. They watch the condition of the soil. They observe signs that others might overlook. A slight change in water levels. A damaged section of canal. A plant struggling beneath the sun. Experience teaches them where to look. And experience takes time to acquire. Many skills in ancient Egypt required years of observation. The land rewarded patience. A farmer could not rush a harvest. Seeds required time. Water required time. Growth required time. Living within these natural limits encouraged a patient outlook. Entire generations became accustomed to waiting for results. The same was true for many other professions. Builders worked on projects that lasted months or years. Craftsmen developed skills through long practice. Scribes spent years learning their profession. Progress often arrived slowly. But slow progress was accepted because it was normal. Near the riverbank, fishermen prepare their nets. The smell of wet reeds fills the air. Small boats drift gently beside the shore. The river provides both transportation and food. For many families, it is impossible to imagine life without it. The Nile influences nearly everything. Travel follows its course. Trade follows its course. Settlements follow its course. The river acts almost like a great road stretching through the entire country. People moving along it carry goods, stories, and ideas. Yet even these exchanges often happen gradually. News travels by boat. Goods travel by boat. People travel by boat. Everything moves at the speed of the river and the wind. The result is a world where change has time to settle gently rather than arriving all at once. By midday, the familiar heat returns. The sunlight brightens every wall and pathway. Dust hangs in the air. Workers wipe sweat from their faces. The smell of warm earth becomes stronger. A laborer pauses beneath a patch of shade. His breathing slows. Nearby, others do the same. These brief moments of rest become important parts of the day. The climate itself shapes behavior. The environment teaches people when to work and when to pause. Such lessons are repeated year after year until they become traditions. Many traditions begin this way. A practical solution survives because it works. The solution becomes habit. The habit becomes custom. Eventually the custom feels ancient. No one remembers exactly when it began. It simply exists. This process helped preserve many aspects of Egyptian life. The longer a custom survived, the more natural it seemed. The more natural it seemed, the less likely people were to abandon it. Afternoon arrives. The workshops remain busy. A carpenter smooths a wooden surface. A potter shapes clay. A basket maker weaves reeds together with practiced hands. Each movement reflects years of experience. Many craftsmen learn by watching older relatives. The workshop itself becomes a place where knowledge passes from one generation to another. A father demonstrates a technique. A child observes. Later the child attempts the same task. Mistakes are corrected. Skills improve. Years pass. Eventually the student becomes the teacher. The cycle continues. This kind of learning encourages continuity. Knowledge remains connected to people rather than institutions alone. It lives inside families. It lives inside communities. It survives through repetition. As the sun begins its descent, the landscape changes once more. The light softens. The harsh brightness of midday fades. Long shadows return across fields and roads. Workers know the day is nearing its end. Fatigue settles into muscles. Tools are gathered. Animals are guided home. The evening breeze slowly arrives. Its arrival feels like a reward after hours of heat. Near the village, cooking fires begin appearing. Thin columns of smoke rise into the sky. The familiar smell of baking bread drifts through the streets. Children return from errands. Families prepare meals. The village grows lively in a quiet way. Not with excitement. Not with noise. But with the gentle activity of people returning home. Inside one small house, bread is placed beside vegetables and fish. A family gathers. Their conversation is simple. They discuss work. They discuss relatives. They discuss practical concerns. Tomorrow's tasks are already waiting. The future rarely stretches very far ahead. Most people focus on the next day. The next season. The next harvest. Life feels immediate. Grounded. Connected to the land. As darkness settles across the valley, the stars appear once again. The river reflects them softly. The desert beyond the fields becomes invisible beneath the night sky. The world feels peaceful. Timeless. A traveler passing through might notice how little appears rushed. The river moves slowly. The boats move slowly. The seasons move slowly. Even history itself seems to move slowly here. And perhaps that is one reason ancient Egypt endured for so long. Its people built their lives around rhythms that changed gradually. They learned to trust cycles. They learned to trust experience. They learned to trust traditions that had already survived many generations. The moon rises higher. The village grows quieter. One by one, lamps are extinguished. Families settle into sleep. The day's labor is finished. Tomorrow will bring another sunrise over the Nile. Another day of work. Another day of bread baking and water carrying. Another day of fishing and farming. Another day of bread baking and water carrying. Another day of fishing and farming. Another day that will look remarkably similar to countless days that came before. And beneath the calm glow of the stars, ancient Egypt drifts peacefully through another night, carried forward by the same slow and steady rhythm that has guided it for centuries. And beneath the calm glow of the stars, ancient Egypt drifts peacefully through another night, carried forward by the same slow and steady rhythm that has guided it for centuries. The night feels deeper now. The air is cooler than it was during the day, but still gentle. It carries the faint scent of water from the Nile and the dry warmth of sand from the distant desert. Together, they mix into something that belongs only to this place. Inside the sleeping village, time seems to soften. There is no urgency here. No rush. Only the quiet movement of night passing over the land. Somewhere near the riverbank, a small boat shifts slightly as water laps against its sides. The sound is soft, almost like breathing. The river never fully stops. Even in silence, it continues its journey northward, shaping the land as it always has. Ancient Egyptians lived beside this constant motion. It was familiar. So familiar that it became part of how they understood life itself. Everything moved, but not quickly. Everything changed, but slowly enough to feel natural. And so, even the idea of change felt different here. Not something sudden. Not something disruptive. But something that arrived gently, like a new season. Inside a small home, a family sleeps close together for warmth and comfort. The night wind slips through tiny gaps in the walls, but the structure holds steady. These homes are simple, built from mud and straw, shaped by hands that learned the same techniques from earlier hands. Nothing about them is experimental. Everything is known. Everything is repeated. Outside, the village dogs shift positions and then settle again. A few chickens remain quiet in enclosed spaces. Even the animals seem to understand the rhythm of rest and activity. The world is resting. But it is not still. Time continues its slow movement. Long before dawn, a faint glow begins to return at the edge of the horizon. It is barely noticeable at first, like the memory of light rather than light itself. The stars begin to fade again, one by one, as if the sky is slowly letting go of them. Another cycle is beginning. This cycle has happened countless times before. And will happen countless times again. In the earliest light of morning, a man walks alone along a dirt path leading toward the fields. His footsteps are quiet. He knows this route without thinking. His body moves as if remembering it on its own. Around him, the land is still cool. The river beside him reflects the pale sky. Mist hovers gently above the water. It feels like a world not fully awake yet. He pauses for a moment and looks across the fields. Everything is familiar. The same irrigation channels. The same rows of soil waiting for work. The same distant palm trees standing quietly against the lightning sky. Nothing demands attention in a sudden way. Everything is already understood. As more people begin to wake, the village slowly fills with life again. The rhythm returns, not because someone commands it, but because it has always been this way. A woman kneels to prepare grain. A child carries water. A fisherman unties his boat from a wooden post. A scribe prepares his materials for the day. Each person steps into a role that feels natural because it has been seen so many times before. Not only by them, but by those who came before them, and those before them again. In the fields, the work resumes with the rising sun. The soil is warm beneath bare feet. Tools are lifted. Water is guided through channels that have existed longer than most memories. There is a sense of continuity here that does not need explanation. It simply exists. Even when new ideas appear, they often settle slowly into the existing way of life. They are adjusted, adapted, made to fit what already works. Because survival depends on stability. And stability depends on what is already known. As the morning grows brighter, the river continues to define the shape of everything around it. It is not just water. It is direction. It is movement. It is life itself flowing through a narrow green valley surrounded by endless desert. People live close to it because there is no other choice. And because living close to it means living within its rhythm. Flood and retreat. Planting and harvest. Work and rest. Year after year, the same pattern unfolds. Not exactly identical, but similar enough to feel like memory repeating itself. In a small workshop, a craftsman shapes a piece of wood. His movements are careful but unhurried. The design he follows was taught to him long ago. And it was taught to his teacher long before that. There is pride in doing things the right way. Not the newest way. Not the fastest way. But the way that has been proven over time. Outside, the sound of distant voices rises and falls. Trade begins again along familiar paths. Goods move between settlements that have known each other for generations. Even disagreements and agreements often follow familiar forms. The structure of society feels layered, like the soil of the riverbank itself. Built slowly. Pressed down by time. Strengthened by repetition. By midday, the sun is high again. Heat returns to the valley. The land becomes bright and heavy with light. People adjust their pace without thinking. Work slows slightly. Rest becomes part of survival, not choice. A man leans against a wall in the shade. His breathing is steady. Nearby, someone passes him a small container of water. No words are needed. This is understood. The environment teaches behavior as clearly as any instruction ever could. When the heat rises, people pause. When it softens, they continue. Life bends gently around the climate, and over time, those bends become tradition. Not laws written in stone, but habits written in experience. Across the fields, the cycle continues. Not because it is forced, but because it works. And in a world where survival depends on what works, change often arrives only when it must. Even then, it arrives carefully, slowly, respectfully, as if it knows it is stepping into something already deeply established. As afternoon begins to soften into evening once more, the village prepares for the return home. The same path is taken again. The same river is crossed. The same dust rises beneath feet that have walked this ground many times before. Smoke rises. Bread is baked. Water is shared. Voices grow warmer as fatigue settles in. The day closes the same way it opened. Not as an ending, but as a pause in a cycle that never truly breaks. And when night returns again over the Nile, it brings the same quiet presence it always has. A sky full of stars. A river full of movement. A land full of memory that does not need to be spoken aloud. Because here, in this ancient valley, time does not rush forward. It flows. Slowly. Steadily. Like the river that shaped it all. Like the river that shaped it all. The night returns again, and with it, the familiar quiet that settles over the Nile Valley like a soft covering. The wind moves gently across the fields, brushing over dry reeds and resting grain. The sound is barely there, more like a feeling than an actual noise. The land seems to breathe slowly, rising and falling with the rhythm of water and earth. In the distance, the river continues its endless journey. It does not hurry. It does not pause. It simply flows, as it always has, carrying with it the reflection of stars and the memory of countless nights before this one. Ancient Egypt lived inside this feeling of repetition. Not repetition as boredom, but repetition as stability. A comfort found in knowing that the world would likely behave tomorrow as it behaved today. Inside the sleeping village, time feels soft again. A few lamps are still lit, but dimly. Their glow flickers against the inside walls of homes, casting slow-moving shadows that fade in and out like breathing. Most people are asleep. But even in sleep, they remain part of the rhythm of the land. Somewhere, a baby stirs briefly before settling again. Somewhere else, an elder shifts position on a woven mat. The night holds them all gently. And beyond the village, the fields rest under the open sky. These fields are not separate from the people. They are part of them. Every path walked, every seed planted, every harvest gathered, ties human life to the soil in a long, continuous relationship. It is not a relationship that changes quickly. It is built slowly, over generations, through quiet repetition. Before dawn begins to return, there is a moment when the world feels suspended. Not fully night. Not yet morning. A soft space between darkness and light. In this space, everything feels still. The river is still moving. The wind is still present. But the land itself feels paused, as if waiting without expectation. Then, slowly, the first sign of light appears again. Not sudden. Not dramatic. Just a faint change at the edge of the horizon. A softening of darkness. A thinning of night. The cycle continues. In one small home near the edge of the village, a man wakes before the sun. He does not rush. There is no need. He sits quietly for a moment, adjusting to the coming day. He listens. Outside, the faint sounds of early movement begin again. The distant call of a bird. The soft shifting of animals. The gentle creak of a door opening. Another day is forming. Not as something new, but as something familiar returning. He stands, steps outside, and feels the coolness of early morning air. The ground beneath him is slightly damp. The river nearby reflects the first pale light. He walks without hurry toward the place where his work will begin. Like so many others, he follows a path already known. A path shaped by many feet before his. As he moves through the village, he passes homes still quiet in sleep. He passes walls that have stood for years. He passes narrow streets shaped not by design alone, but by use over time. Everything here feels gently worn. Not worn down, but worn into familiarity. As if the land itself has been softened by repetition. When the sun rises fully, the village will awaken more completely. But for now, it remains in that early stage of transition. A place between silence and activity. Between rest and labor. Between night and day. The fields wait nearby. They are patient. They always are. They do not demand sudden action. They respond only when the time is right. And the people who live here understand that timing deeply. They have learned it through generations of observation. Through watching seasons arrive and depart. Through watching the river rise and fall. Through watching crops grow and fade. In the fields, the soil carries memory. Not memory in a human sense, but memory shaped by repetition. Water arriving at certain times. Seeds planted in certain patterns. Tools moving across the same ground again and again. These patterns create a kind of stability that stretches far beyond a single lifetime. As more light spreads across the valley, movement increases. A woman steps outside carrying a bundle. A child follows behind her, still half asleep. A man checks the sky briefly, reading it the way others read written words. Clouds are few. The day will likely be hot. This knowledge does not need explanation. It is simply understood. The Nile continues to guide life quietly in the background. Its presence is constant, even when not directly noticed. Canals branching from it carry water to fields. Small channels guide moisture where it is needed. Every drop is part of a system that has been shaped and reshaped over time, yet always remains recognizable. The system is not fragile, but it is careful. Care built from experience. Experience built from time. By mid-morning, the rhythm of labor is fully present again. Workers move across fields with steady steps. The sound of tools meeting earth returns. Voices rise softly, then fade. There is no need for urgency. Work is not something to be rushed. It is something to be carried out in harmony with the land. A farmer kneels to examine the soil. He presses it lightly between his fingers. It feels familiar. He knows what it is telling him. Without words, it communicates moisture, strength, readiness. This kind of knowledge cannot be written easily. It is learned through presence. Through years spent observing small changes that others might miss. Nearby, another worker adjusts a channel of water. A slight shift in direction. A small correction. Nothing dramatic, but important. These small adjustments, repeated over time, are what maintain the larger system. And so, while history may remember kings and monuments, the daily maintenance of life is what truly holds the world together. As the sun climbs higher, the heat returns. The land brightens. Shadows shrink. Work continues at a slower, steady pace. People pause when needed. They resume when possible. The rhythm is never forced. It is followed. A group of workers rests beneath a palm tree. The shade is thin but welcome. Water is shared. No one speaks much. The silence feels natural. The kind of silence that belongs to tired bodies and familiar routines. In this moment, nothing feels urgent beyond rest itself. And rest is part of the rhythm too. As afternoon begins to settle in, the village once again starts its slow transition toward evening. Tools are gathered. Paths are retraced. The movement of people shifts from outward to inward. From fields to homes. From labor to rest. Smoke begins to rise again from cooking fires. The smell of bread returns. The same smell that has returned countless times before. Families gather once more. Voices become softer. The day begins to close, not with finality, but with familiarity. And as the sun lowers toward the horizon, casting long golden light across the Nile Valley, everything feels gently connected again. The river continues to flow. The fields continue to wait. The villages continue to breathe. And the people, generation after generation, continue to live within a world that changes slowly enough to feel like it is always staying the same. Night will return soon. And with it, the same quiet, the same stars, the same gentle movement of water and wind across a land that remembers more through repetition than through record. A land where time does not shout forward, but whispers, softly, endlessly, into the darkness. Softly, endlessly, into the darkness. And the darkness listens. The night over the Nile is never empty. It carries the memory of everything that happened during the day, holding it gently as if nothing ever truly disappears here. The village sleeps again. But beneath the sleep, life continues in small ways. Breath rises and falls. Dreams move quietly through minds that are too tired to resist them. Some dream of fields. Some dream of water. Some dream of faces they see every day in waking life. In ancient Egypt, even dreams would have felt familiar, shaped by the same surroundings, the same sounds, the same slow rhythm of existence. The river remains the center of it all. Even in darkness, it defines direction. North and south. Life and distance. Movement and return. Everything bends toward it. Everything depends on it. As the hours pass, the sky begins its slow shift again. Night does not end suddenly here. It loosens its hold gradually, like fabric easing away from stone. First, the stars grow faint. Then the air begins to change. Then the first trace of light appears, almost invisible at first. And once again, the world prepares to begin. This repetition is not noticed in urgency. It is simply accepted. Because it has always been this way. In a small home near the edge of cultivated land, an elderly woman wakes before dawn fully arrives. Her movements are slow, careful. Not because she is uncertain, but because she has learned that the morning rewards patience. She sits quietly for a moment, listening to the village around her. Nothing is loud. Everything is soft. A distant rooster calls. A door opens. A faint sound of water being collected. She stands and moves toward the entrance. Outside, the air is cool again. The kind of coolness that belongs only to the earliest hours of the day. She pauses briefly, looking toward the river. It is still there. Always there. A constant line in a world that changes only in small, gentle ways. This constancy is something people grow up with so deeply that it becomes invisible. Like breathing. Like sleeping. Like waking. The river is not questioned. It is lived with. As more light gathers in the sky, the village slowly wakes again. Not all at once, but in layers. One household. Then another. Then another. Each awakening blends into the next until the entire village is once again part of the day. The rhythm never needs instruction. It exists on its own. A man steps outside carrying a tool that has been repaired many times. Its handle is smooth from use. Its shape is slightly imperfect from years of fixing rather than replacing. This too reflects the nature of life here. Things are maintained. Not replaced. Preserved. Not discarded. The same applies to knowledge. The same applies to tradition. The same applies to memory. Across the fields, the early morning light spreads gently over crops and soil. The land appears almost calm before the labor begins. But beneath that calm is constant preparation. Water channels ready to be guided. Soil ready to be tended. Tools ready to be lifted. The work will begin as it always does. Not with ceremony, but with continuation. A fisherman near the river checks his boat again. The wood is worn smooth by time. The rope is familiar in his hands. He does not think about how many times this action has been repeated before. He simply performs it. Because it works. Because it has always worked. And in a world where survival depends on reliability, repetition becomes wisdom. As the sun rises higher, the valley fills once more with activity. Dust rises from paths as people move between home and field. The sound of movement is steady. Not hurried. Not chaotic. Just present. Like the river itself translated into human motion. In the fields, workers spread out across the green expanse beside the desert. The contrast between life and emptiness is always nearby. On one side, fertile land shaped by water. On the other, vast silence of sand and stone. This closeness to emptiness may have influenced how Egyptians valued stability. Because everything they depended on existed within a narrow space. A narrow space requires careful maintenance. A narrow space rewards consistency. A narrow space does not forgive sudden disruption. So life becomes attentive. Not in fear, but in awareness. Midday approaches again. The sun grows stronger. The familiar weight of heat returns to the land. People adjust without needing to be told. Work slows where it must slow. Rest appears where it is needed. A group of laborers sits in the shade of a structure built long ago. They drink water in silence. No one speaks of change. No one speaks of speed. The present moment is enough. Around them, the world continues its quiet balance. The river flows. The fields stand. The sky burns bright above everything. And life continues moving within it. Slowly. Predictably. Comfortably. Even the idea of time feels different here. It is not measured in urgency, but in cycles. Floods. Seasons. Generations. A child becomes an adult. An adult becomes an elder. An elder becomes memory. And memory becomes teaching for the next child. This cycle does not break. It folds back into itself again and again. As afternoon light begins its gentle descent, the workers return once more to paths leading home. The movement feels familiar by now. Not because it is identical every day, but because it is recognizable. The same direction. The same ending. The same return. Smoke rises from homes ahead. Cooking begins again. The smell of bread returns again. Voices soften again. The village prepares for evening again. And in this repetition, there is comfort. A sense that the world is behaving as it should. That nothing essential is missing. That life, though hard, remains steady. When night arrives once more, it does so without resistance. The sky darkens gently. Stars appear patiently. The river reflects them without disturbance. And the land settles into its familiar quiet. Another day completed. Another cycle fulfilled. Another small continuation of a pattern that stretches far beyond memory. Ancient Egypt does not feel like a place rushing towards something new. It feels like a place flowing through something already known. Like water moving through a channel carved slowly by time. And as the village sleeps again beneath the endless sky, that slow movement continues. Soft. steady, unbroken. As if the world itself has learned to breathe in a rhythm that never needs to change. As if the world itself has learned to breathe in a rhythm that never needs to change. The night settles again over the Nile Valley. Not as an event, but as a return. A return to something familiar, something expected, something gently remembered by the land itself. The wind moves through the reeds along the riverbank, slow and unhurried. It carries the faint coolness of water and distant sand. It passes over sleeping fields, over quiet homes, over paths that will soon be walked again when morning arrives. Everything rests in place. Everything remains where it has always been. Inside the village, the last signs of activity fade away. A final ember dims in a cooking fire. A door is adjusted and left closed. A small movement inside a home settles into stillness. Then there is only night. Not empty night, but full night. Full of quiet presence. Full of continuity. Full of the slow movement of time that does not feel like movement at all. The Nile continues its journey. Even in darkness, it does not change its direction. It does not rush. It does not hesitate. It simply moves forward, as it has always done, carrying the valley's life along its banks. In the stillness, it is easy to imagine how deeply this river shaped the minds of those who lived beside it. A constant thing creates a constant expectation. A steady thing creates steady lives. A predictable thing creates predictable days. And so, life in ancient Egypt became closely tied to what could be trusted. The river could be trusted. The seasons could be trusted. The return of dawn could be trusted. Even hardship, when it came, often arrived within familiar patterns. It was not unknown. It was variation within something already understood. Hours pass quietly. The sky begins its slow transformation again. Night does not break. It softens. The stars fade gradually, as if they are stepping back rather than disappearing. A faint glow appears far across the horizon, where land and sky meet in a line that never changes. Another day is preparing itself. And the village, still mostly asleep, is already part of it. In one home, a young man opens his eyes before full dawn. He does not rise immediately. He lies still for a moment, listening to the silence around him. There is comfort in this silence. It is not absence. It is familiarity. He hears distant movement outside. A faint sound of water being drawn. A soft step on earth. The early beginning of another cycle. He sits up slowly, feeling the cool air of morning beginning to replace the warmth of sleep. No urgency touches his movements. There is no need. Time here does not demand speed. It asks only for continuation. Outside, the sky grows lighter. The river begins to show its shape again, first as a dark line, then as a reflective surface catching the earliest light. The valley is waking. Not suddenly, but layer by layer. Like breath returning to a resting body. People begin to emerge again into the morning. The same doors open. The same paths are taken. The same routines unfold. A woman adjusts a woven basket and steps toward the water source. A farmer checks the condition of his tools before the fields. A child follows behind an adult, learning without words the shape of the day. Everything repeats, but nothing feels forced. It feels natural. Because it has always been this way. The land itself encourages this rhythm. The Nile provides water, but only in its own timing. The sun provides light, but only in its own cycle. The soil provides growth, but only when tended correctly and patiently. Human life bends around these truths. And over time, that bending becomes tradition. By the time the sun rises fully, the village is already alive with activity. The fields begin to fill with movement. The river becomes active with boats. The workshops return to quiet labor. Even conversation feels gentle, woven into work rather than separate from it. A craftsman shapes clay with hands that remember every motion. A fisherman watches the water with patience learned over many seasons. A scribe prepares to record details that matter for order and continuity. Each person contributes to a system that does not need to be constantly reimagined. It only needs to be maintained. And maintenance, in this world, is life itself. As the morning continues, the light grows stronger. Heat begins its slow return. But no one is surprised by it. It is expected. Like everything else. The rhythm of the day is already known before it fully arrives. Work in the fields begins again in steady patterns. Water moves through channels that have been adjusted and repaired countless times before. Soil is tended. Plants are observed. Small corrections are made where needed. Nothing dramatic. Nothing sudden. Just small acts of attention repeated across time. And those small acts, multiplied across generations, become the shape of civilization itself. By midday, the heat once again presses gently over the valley. The sun stands high. The land glows in bright, unwavering light. Movement slows slightly. Rest appears naturally where it is needed. A group gathers in shade without planning it. Water is shared without question. Silence becomes a form of relief. Even in stillness, life continues. The river continues. The fields continue. The cycle continues. And in that continuation, there is a quiet sense of stability that does not need to be spoken. Nothing is new. Nothing is final. Everything is part of something ongoing. As afternoon approaches, the familiar pattern begins to shift again toward evening. Not abruptly, but gradually, as always. Work draws toward completion. Paths lead back toward home. The village begins to gather itself inward once more. Smoke rises in soft lines against the sky. The smell of bread and cooked grain returns. Voices grow warmer, slower, more personal. The day is not ending. It is simply turning. And as it turns, it remains recognizable. The same shapes. The same movements. The same return. When evening finally settles across the Nile, it does so like a familiar blanket laid gently over the land. Stars appear once again. The river reflects them once again. The village grows quiet once again. And the rhythm continues, unbroken, unchanged in its essence, even as centuries pass beyond notice. A world shaped not by sudden change, but by the comfort of what returns. Again. And again. And again. Again. And again. And again. And still, the river continues. The Nile does not remember the days it has passed through. It only moves forward, carrying time the way it carries silt, water, and the reflections of stars that never stay in one place for long. The night over Egypt deepens once more, but it does not feel like an ending. It feels like a pause between breaths. A long, gentle pause. Inside the village, sleep holds everyone together in the same quiet rhythm. Not as individuals, but as part of a larger pattern. One life resting beside another life. One home beside another home. One generation resting inside the same land that held the generations before it. Nothing feels separate here. Everything feels connected through repetition. through return, through continuity. The wind moves lightly again across the fields. It passes over places where work was done earlier in the day. Footprints remain faintly pressed into the soil, already beginning to soften. By tomorrow, they will be almost gone. But the work will return. And new footprints will take their place. In this way, the land never stays marked for long, even though it is always being shaped. The Nile Valley is like that. Always shaped. Always reshaped. Always returning to something familiar. Somewhere in the darkness, a small animal moves through reeds near the riverbank. It is unseen, only heard. A soft rustle. A brief pause. Then silence again. The river remains steady behind it. That steadiness is what everything depends on. It is what farmers trust when they plant. It is what families trust when they build homes. It is what entire towns trust when they grow and settle into place. Not because the river is controlled, but because it is known. And what is known becomes the foundation of life. Hours pass in slow layers. Night becomes deeper, then softer, then thinner, until, once again, the edge of the sky begins to change. This change is subtle, almost invisible at first. A slight lifting of darkness. A quiet loosening of the night's hold. The world begins to return, not suddenly, but gently, as if remembering itself. In a small home near the river, a woman wakes before the light fully arrives. She does not move quickly. There is no need for urgency in her gestures. She sits for a moment, feeling the coolness of early air, listening to the faint sounds of the village awakening around her. Nothing is surprising. Nothing is unfamiliar. The morning arrives the way it always has. She stands, adjusts her clothing, and steps outside. The ground is cool beneath her feet. The sky above is turning pale, slowly revealing the shape of the land again. The river appears first as a shadow, then as a surface catching early light. It is always there. Always returning. Always continuing. Across the village, others begin to stir. A man opens a wooden gate with a soft creak. A child sits up and rubs sleep from their eyes. A baker prepares grain again, just as before. The cycle begins again without announcement. Without instruction. Without interruption. It is simply how the world functions here. The fields outside the village wait in silence as morning grows stronger. They are not empty. They are resting. Resting in the way land rests between labor. The soil holds memory of previous work, even if no one speaks of it. Water channels wait for their flow. Tools wait for their hands. The sun rises higher. Light spreads across the valley. The desert beyond remains distant and still, unchanged in its vastness. But the narrow green strip of life beside the river begins to move again. People walk the same paths they walked yesterday. And the day before. And the day before that. A farmer steps into the field and looks across it without needing to think about what must be done first. He already knows. The knowledge is not spoken. It is lived. A fisherman pushes his boat into the river with practiced motion. A craftsman opens his workspace. A scribe prepares materials that have been used for generations in similar ways. Each action fits into something larger than itself. Something that has existed long before this moment. And will continue long after. As the morning grows warmer, the familiar structure of the day takes shape. Work begins in the fields. Movement spreads along the river. Small groups gather where labor is shared. The sound of activity rises gently into the air, never overwhelming, never chaotic, but steady like breathing. The Nile continues to define everything. Its presence is constant, even when not directly looked at. It determines where life can exist, where settlements can grow, where crops can be sustained, where people can remain in place year after year. Without the river, nothing holds together. With it, everything finds order. This is why life here changes slowly. Not because it cannot change, but because change must always pass through something already strong. By midday, the heat returns as expected. The sky becomes bright and heavy with light. The air settles over the land like a warm stillness. People adjust without thinking. Work slows. Rest appears naturally. There is no need for planning this rhythm. It is built into experience. A man sits in shade near a wall, letting the heat pass over him without resistance. Nearby, another rests with eyes half closed, listening to distant movement in the fields. The world is not paused. It is simply moving more gently. Even sound feels softened. Voices carry less distance. Footsteps feel slower. Time itself seems to stretch. And yet, nothing is delayed. Everything continues exactly as it should. When afternoon begins its slow descent, the land starts to change once more. Light shifts. Shadows grow longer. The feeling of transition returns. Workers gather tools again. Paths are retraced again. The movement toward home begins again. This return is as important as the work itself. Because return completes the cycle. Without return, there is no rhythm. Without rhythm, there is no stability. And stability is what holds everything together. As the village comes back to life in its evening form, smoke rises into the cooling air. The smell of bread and cooked grain returns once more. Children move between homes. Animals settle. Voices grow softer, more familiar, more personal. The day closes in the same way it always does. Not abruptly, but gently. Like a hand lowering a lamp. And when night arrives again, it does so without disturbance. The stars return. The river reflects them. The fields rest. The village sleeps. And the cycle continues, as it always has, without urgency, without interruption, without needing to become anything different than what it already is. A world shaped not by rapid transformation, but by quiet repetition, by patient continuity, by the slow accumulation of ordinary days that, together, become something far greater than change itself. And in that endless return, ancient Egypt remains still. Not because it is frozen, but because it is always moving in the same gentle rhythm. Like the river. Always flowing. Always familiar. Always carrying life forward at the pace of time itself. Always carrying life forward at the pace of time itself. And time, here, does not feel like something that runs ahead. It feels like something that circles back. Like the river returning to its own shape each day as light touches it again. The night remains over the Nile, but it is already thinning. Not ending. Just loosening its hold, the way tired hands slowly let go. In the village, sleep continues in soft layers. Not all at once. Not evenly. But gently, as each person moves between rest and the first quiet awareness of morning. A rooster calls somewhere in the distance, not sharp or sudden, but familiar enough to blend into the air. The sound does not disturb the sleep. It belongs to it. The river remains close, as it always is. Even when unseen in darkness, it is never absent. Its presence is felt in the air itself, in the coolness near the ground, in the faint sound of movement that never fully stops. In ancient Egypt, even silence had structure. Even stillness had direction. As the first light returns again, the land does what it has done for countless mornings. It becomes visible again. Slowly. Patiently. The horizon lightens. The shapes of trees, fields, and homes begin to separate from the darkness. Everything returns from shadow into form. A man steps outside before the sun has fully risen. He pauses for a moment, simply standing. There is no rush in his posture. No urgency in his breath. Only awareness of the familiar beginning. The ground is cool beneath him. The air is soft. The river nearby reflects a pale, uncertain light. He has seen this moment many times before. And yet it never feels identical. It feels like a return that is always slightly new, even when nothing has truly changed. This is how days are experienced here. Not as separate events, but as variations of the same enduring rhythm. Inside homes, movement begins again. A pot is lifted. Water is carried. Bread is prepared. The simplest actions are repeated without hesitation because they are known so deeply they no longer require thought. They are part of the body. Part of memory. Part of life itself. Outside, the fields begin to awaken in appearance as more people step into them. The green stretch beside the river becomes active once more. Small figures move across it, spaced far apart but connected by shared purpose. The land receives them as it always does. Without resistance. Without surprise. The soil is familiar with human hands. The irrigation channels are familiar with human care. Everything here has been shaped through long repetition. And so, everything feels stable. Even when small changes occur, they settle slowly into the larger pattern. A slightly adjusted water channel. A repaired tool. A new variation in a familiar technique. Nothing breaks the rhythm. It only deepens it. As the sun rises higher, the light grows stronger again. The river becomes brighter, reflecting the sky in shifting patterns that change moment by moment. Boats move along it, steady and unhurried. Some carry goods. Some carry people. Some simply follow the flow because the flow itself defines direction. On land, work continues with the same steady pace. A farmer bends, checks the soil, adjusts a small detail. A craftsman continues shaping material into familiar forms. A scribe records details that may be needed later, preserving order in a world that values continuity over change. Everything is connected through repetition. And repetition, here, is not emptiness. It is structure. By midday, heat spreads across the valley once more. The air becomes still in the way it always does at this hour. Movement slows, not from interruption, but from understanding. The land itself teaches this rhythm. Work when the air is cool. Pause when the heat becomes heavy. Resume when it softens again. This pattern is not enforced. It is learned through living. Generations do not need instruction to understand it. They grow into it, the way a river slowly shapes its own banks over time. Under a patch of shade near a wall, a small group rests quietly. No one speaks loudly. There is no need. The world around them is already speaking in its own way. Through warmth. Through stillness. Through the distant sound of water moving beyond the fields. Even rest feels structured here. Not random. Not separate from work. But part of the same cycle. Work. Rest. Return. Continue. As afternoon begins to shift toward evening, the familiar transformation starts again. Light softens. Shadows lengthen. The sense of closure slowly returns. People gather tools. Paths become retraced. Movement turns inward once more. The village begins its quiet return toward home. This return is not an ending. It is part of the design of the day. The same design that has existed for as long as memory can reach. Smoke rises again from cooking fires. The smell of bread and cooked grain drifts through the air once more. Voices become softer, more personal, less tied to labor and more tied to presence. Evening is a time of gathering. A time of small conversations. A time when the weight of the day is released slowly, not suddenly. Inside homes, light flickers again. Shadows move gently across walls that have held the same shape for years. Outside, the river reflects the deepening sky. It does not hurry toward night. It simply continues its movement, as it always does. When darkness arrives again, it does so with quiet familiarity. Stars appear without effort. The land settles without resistance. The village rests without uncertainty. And the cycle, once again, completes itself without ever truly ending. Because here, in this ancient valley, endings are rare. What exists instead is continuation. A world shaped not by final moments, but by the endless return of the same gentle rhythm. A rhythm that carries people, land, and time itself forward. Slowly. Softly. Without ever needing to become anything else. Slowly. Softly. Without ever needing to become anything else. The night settles once more over the Nile, and it feels almost the same as every night before it. Not identical in detail, but identical in feeling. A familiar quiet spreads across the valley, as if the land itself is exhaling after a long day of heat and movement. The river continues its patient flow. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It simply exists, carrying reflection and darkness together in the same steady path. Inside the sleeping homes, life becomes quiet again. Not empty. Just quiet. Breathing slows. Bodies rest. The weight of the day fades from tired muscles and sun-warmed skin. Outside, the village becomes still enough that even small sounds feel distant and soft. A shifting animal. A faint wind passing through reeds. A loose door settling back into place. Everything belongs to the night without resistance. This is how the world feels when it is not being worked. Not paused. Just resting within its own rhythm. Time continues, but without urgency. And in that absence of urgency, the sense of continuity becomes stronger. Because nothing here ever feels like it suddenly begins or suddenly ends. It unfolds. It returns. It repeats. The sky above the Nile deepens again. Stars appear slowly, one by one, as if they are remembering their places. The river below mirrors them in broken pieces of light. Water and sky becoming almost the same thing in the darkness. A long, quiet symmetry. Somewhere along the riverbank, a small boat rests against the shore. Its shape is simple. Its purpose familiar. It will move again when morning comes. Just as it always has. Just as it always will. In ancient Egypt, even objects seem to understand this rhythm. They are not discarded quickly. They are repaired. Used again. Passed along. Kept within cycles of usefulness. Nothing is rushed into replacement. Because stability is valued more than novelty. And continuity is stronger than change. As the night moves deeper, there is a moment when everything feels suspended again. Not frozen. Just balanced. The river, the fields, the homes, the people. All resting within the same slow pattern. A pattern that does not need to be explained because it is lived every day. Then, far beyond the horizon, the faintest sign of return appears once more. A soft light that does not yet belong to the sun. Just the suggestion of it. A thinning of darkness at the edge of the world. And with it, the village begins again. Even before waking fully, life prepares itself. A body shifts. A breath changes. A mind becomes slightly aware of morning before it arrives. In one home, a young girl opens her eyes briefly and then closes them again, still resting, still caught between sleep and waking. In another, a man sits up quietly, listening to the faint movement of the village outside. There is no surprise in this moment. Only recognition. The return of something expected. The return of something known. As the light grows, the valley slowly reveals itself again. The river appears first. Then the fields. Then the outlines of homes. Then the movement of people. Each layer returning from darkness at its own pace. The same order. The same rhythm. Every day. Across generations. A farmer steps outside and feels the cool air of early morning. He does not think of it as new. He thinks of it as familiar again. A fisherman moves toward the water with practiced steps. A baker begins his work. A scribe prepares his materials. Each life resumes its place within the larger pattern without hesitation. Because the pattern is already known. It does not need to be discovered. Only continued. As the sun rises higher, the valley fills with light and movement once more. The river shines brightly. The fields stretch out in green stillness. The desert beyond remains unchanged, vast, and silent as ever. And between them, life continues in its narrow, fertile path. Not rushing. Not pausing. Just continuing. Work begins again in steady motions. Water is guided. Soil is tended. Tools are lifted. Voices rise and fall in the distance, blending into the sound of daily life. Everything feels balanced in its repetition. Even hardship, when it appears, fits into the same structure. It does not break the rhythm. It becomes part of it. Because the rhythm is strong enough to hold both ease and difficulty within the same flow. By midday, heat settles over the valley again. The sky becomes bright and heavy. The air grows still. And once again, the land slows gently into rest within motion. People sit in shade. They drink water. They wait without frustration for the heat to pass. There is no struggle against this cycle. Only acceptance. Because it has always returned this way. Always softened. Always shifted. Always moved forward. As afternoon begins to fade, the familiar turn toward evening returns once more. The day begins to close, not sharply, but gradually, like a breath releasing. Work is gathered. Paths are walked again. Homes come into view again. Smoke rises again. Bread is shared again. Voices grow softer again. Everything returns to its quieter shape. And in that return, there is a deep sense of continuity. A sense that nothing essential has been lost. Only transformed gently from one phase into another. When night arrives again, it does not feel like a break in time. It feels like part of time itself. A necessary resting place in a cycle that never stops. The river continues. The valley rests. The stars return. And ancient Egypt, in its endless rhythm of repetition and renewal, carries on. Not moving quickly. Not changing abruptly. But flowing steadily forward. Like water shaped by centuries. Like life shaped by the river. Like time itself, moving softly through a world that has learned to remain almost the same. And in that sameness, there is peace. And in that sameness, there is peace. The night over the Nile settles one last time, not as the beginning of another cycle, and not as the continuation of something unfinished, but as a quiet resting of everything that has been carried forward through countless days. The river still moves, but it feels softer now. Almost like it is lowering its voice. The wind across the fields is gentle, barely touching the reeds. The village, the homes, the paths, the fields, all rest together beneath the wide and patient sky. There is no urgency left here. No need to move forward. Only the final stillness of a world that has long understood its own rhythm. Inside the homes, people sleep as they always have. Close to one another. Close to the earth. Close to the same walls that held their ancestors before them. Their breathing is steady. Their rest is deep. And in that rest, there is a quiet connection to everything that came before them. To every morning that began beside the river. To every evening that returned to silence. To every generation that lived within the same slow, familiar world. Outside, the Nile reflects the stars one last time. Not as something changing, but as something eternal. A river that has carried life through so many centuries that it no longer feels like time is passing. Only continuing. Only flowing. The desert remains distant and still. The fields lie quiet. The villages rest in their places, unchanged in their shape, softened only by time itself. And now, even time feels less like movement and more like presence. A presence that has always been here. A presence that will remain even after this moment fades. As the night deepens for the final time in this story, there is a sense that nothing is truly ending. Not the river. Not the land. Not the rhythm. Only the telling of it. Because ancient Egypt, in its slow and steady existence, was never defined by sudden beginnings or endings. It was defined by return. By repetition. By the gentle continuity of life lived close to water, close to earth, and close to the same enduring patterns that shaped everything within its reach. And so, as the last quiet breath of night settles over the Nile, the world remains what it has always been. Still. Familiar. Enduring. A land where time does not rush forward, but flows endlessly onward, carrying every moment into the next, without breaking, without haste, and without ever truly stopping. Only continuing. And now, softly, it rests.